Now, in this week's edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll that asked the question, how excited or hopeful are you for the upcoming show, The Mandalorian? I'll also be reading and responding to some of your comments, as well as showing off some of the artwork that was sent in to me this week. And let's then right away get to the results of the poll, where we'll see that 16% of those who voted said they're very excited and think it's going to be great. Another 25% say they're pretty excited and have high hopes. 38% then fall somewhere in the middle and are either somewhat excited or cautiously optimistic, or are more or less neutral towards the show. We then had 14% say they're not really that excited or have their doubts, and 6% say they're not excited at all or think it's going to be terrible. Okay, and quickly before I get to the comments, let me just say I was a little surprised by the results this week. I honestly thought excitement for the show would be a little bit higher still, even given the fact that, yes, many who watch my videos or partake in these polls are of course less than thrilled with Disney Star Wars overall, and thus they have every reason to be apprehensive about, well, anything they're going to put out there. And it wasn't until I started to read the comments, which oftentimes tell the story even better than the poll results do, because as many pointed out this week, there isn't always an option that people feel fits their point of view all that well, and in my defense I am limited to just 5 options with these polls. And this time there were a lot of people, and I do mean a lot, who simply said they weren't paying for another streaming service. And not to get too far off topic, but I do think that's one of the biggest uphill battles Disney Plus has in front of it, that it's yet another $7 a month people have to pay on top of every other streaming service they're already paying for, which is why I feel, especially at the start, Disney is really going to try and put their best foot forward, not to mention spend some money on these launch day shows like The Mandalorian. And quite frankly, I'm super excited for the show myself. I have very little doubts about it, mainly because of those involved in the project, like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, for example, and how much these two guys really love and respect Star Wars. However, there are a lot of people who have their doubts for any number of reasons, and the top-rated comment this week, which comes to us from Max Messling, highlighted the 2 biggest ones, I'd say. Anyway, what he had to say is, a few months ago I would have said very excited, it's going to be great, but the mentions of the show exploring the beginnings of the First Order and Giancarlo Esposito talking about politics have made me a little cautious. Okay, first of all here, fair enough on both points. I certainly get where you're coming from, and as anyone who watches my videos knows, I'm usually very critical of Disney Star Wars. That said, I'll take a bit of a devil's advocate approach, you could say here, because I do always try to be fair and honest and to look at things from all angles. And so looking at it from the Disney or Lucasfilm perspective, they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place with the sequel trilogy going forward. Or should I say with anything associated with it, like the origins of the First Order, for example. Because, yeah, a lot of people don't like the sequels and could care less about the First Order and where they come from at this point. Hell, the movies really should have addressed it and given us some type of answer right within them. They didn't have to go into great detail or anything, but giving us a bit of a summary about how the Empire that we saw defeated in the original trilogy, how they reformed and grew strong enough to conquer the galaxy again, is not just some unnecessary detail we can easily overlook. It's actually an important part of understanding the whole story, or where things went wrong from what we saw last, or how we got to where we even are when the sequels start. That said, though, there are people who do like the sequels and care a great deal about the origins of the First Order, and so a show that seems to be dealing with some of the remnants of the Empire hiding out in the Outer Rim territories post-Return of the Jedi seems like a really logical place to touch on that. Now, you could certainly argue the show didn't have to deal with that at all, that it could and should just focus on bounty hunting and whatnot. But I think Lucasfilm saw this as an opportunity to do both or multiple things with the show. To make a gritty, more adult show for one, and for two, to explore a few different other things. Everything from bounty hunting, to what happened to the Empire post-Return of the Jedi, to hopefully more about Mandalorians and their culture. And the funny thing is, if it had been worded differently or advertised differently, if this show had said it was going to explore the collapse of the Empire, or what happens to it post-Return of the Jedi, I think people are more interested and more forgiving of that idea, even though it's very similar, if not identical, to the idea of the origins of the First Order. Now, as for the comments made by Giancarlo Esposito about exploring modern-day politics, well, I really wish he wouldn't have made those comments because, for a lot of people at this point, just hearing about even a hint of modern-day politics in Star Wars is a complete turnoff, and many Again, especially nowadays, want to just watch something like Star Wars to escape all of that. However, who knows if the show is really meant to be a reflection of the modern political landscape, or just what this particular actor sees it as, or sees his character representing. Because I'd be really surprised if Filoni and Favreau went that route with this show, and despite what some believe, I don't know how much meddling there will be from Disney and Lucasfilm with this show. Again, this being a launch day title, it's very important to them that this be good and well received by fans so that they don't cancel after the first month. I don't know that they'd in any way want to make this show controversial. Okay, and now that I've rambled on about that for a couple minutes, though since many people brought it up in the comments, and I do think it's holding a lot of people back from being really excited about the show, I thought it was important to give my take on it. Anyway, before I get started on that again, let's move on to the next comment, and this time it comes to us from Matt Solid VA, who said, "Honestly, at this point, I'm just so done with everything with Disney. I want to hate them so much for making me feel like this. A few years ago when I heard they were making a Mandalorian series, and an Obi-Wan movie, and even reviving Clone Wars, I couldn't contain my excitement. Now fast forward to today, and I don't feel anything. All the hype I see online for them feels completely irrelevant. I mean, seriously, why are fans so excited about something made by Disney? Has Disney done anything that fans wanted or treated them with respect as of now? No, they haven't, and why would they change their ways now out of nowhere? I think I'm moving away from Star Wars and Disney in general now." And again here, this is something I completely understand, and I can feel you, believe me, I do. I wish I was happy with everything Disney Star Wars, and I was doing nothing but praising it all the time in every single video I make, because I truly felt it was that damn good. Problem is, I don't, and as I've said before, it's the responsibility of the fans and the customers to keep a company honest and to give them feedback, especially well thought out, not overly mean-spirited, constructive criticism. That said, The Mandalorian isn't being made by Disney per se. It's being made by the likes of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, and these guys, I feel at least, are true fans who want to make a great Star Wars show first and foremost. Now, how much or little will Disney and or Lucasfilm tamper with what they're trying to do? That's unknown and debatable. But again, I think they'll keep their hands off it and leave it to the two Star Wars guys to make a show that appeals to Star Wars fans, and hence they'll stay subscribed to their streaming service. At the end of it, that's probably what's the most important to them right now. And really here, Disney itself doesn't make anything Star Wars. They, or Lucasfilm really, hires people to do that. And my biggest complaint with the Disney era of Star Wars is they seem to be hiring, at least in terms of the sequel trilogy, I feel, the wrong people for the job, or they themselves at Disney have been meddling too much with what these people want to do with it. As I've said before, I think J.J. Abrams with The Force Awakens was given a directive on what they, meaning Disney, wanted the movie to be. And the more we get glimpses behind the scenes of that movie, the more we see just how much top execs at Disney, like the CEO himself, Bob Iger, were involved in the decision-making process, even the story part of that. When these people, though obviously brilliant executives, maybe don't know what was best for Star Wars, or what the fans wanted to see. And though I have my doubts about what J.J. Abrams will do with The Rise of Skywalker, I think he'll be far less handcuffed with Episode 9 than he was with Episode 7, much like how Rian Johnson wasn't handcuffed with The Last Jedi, which might be a really bad example considering how much I really don't like that movie. Anyway, in other words here, I expect this show, The Mandalorian, to be, or hope it will be, a Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau Star Wars show, not a Disney Star Wars show. Okay, let's move on now, and for the rest of the video I'll mainly just read comments and give, at most, some quick responses. And I'll kick that off with this comment from Cronin Baxter, who said, "It will be great. Come on, show a little optimism here. It is being made by two lifelong fans of the franchise. Watching them talk about the show is intoxicating. I hope all future Star Wars creators go ahead with even half of Favreau and Filoni's enthusiasm." Then there's this comment from Rigamonti who said, "The more I learn about the show and the producers and directors of the episodes, the more excited I get. Favreau and Filoni are going to kill it. Just listening to either one or both at Celebration talk about Star Wars, it is clear how much love for it and the project they have. Obviously, as a hardcore Mandalorian fan, I hope they do justice to the group. After a pretty good stumble in the Clone Wars being all peace-seeking, they really made them the best part of Rebels. And so I hope they keep rising and have a great story in The Mandalorian." And for anyone who has their doubts about Filoni and Favreau, just go watch their panel from Star Wars Celebration. These were two guys who love Star Wars and were giddy to be doing a show. As for the peaceful Mandalorians that we met in the Clone Wars, I agree that Rebels began to, shall we say, undo that, and I fully believe that The Mandalorian will be another step in the right direction with that faction. Okay, next up here we have this comment from NatGeo1201 who said, "To be honest, the only thing I'm looking forward to in regards to Star Wars at the moment is Clone Wars Season 7. Maybe I'll watch Mandalorian, but I just don't care at the moment. Lost some Star Wars enthusiasm after Last Jedi." And this feels like a good time to point out that a similar poll for the Clone Wars about how excited you are for Season 7 should already be up if you're watching this now. Next up here we have this comment from Cool Dude Productions who said, "I was sold after the teaser trailer. As a filmmaker, I'm aware and concerned that it's full of a bunch of Star Wars nostalgic fan service moments. I'm also concerned that there are these new characters that we have never seen, but seems like Disney is saying, remember how you liked Boba Fett? Well, this is kinda like Boba Fett. Overall, though, I think a darker story going back to something we love like this might be exactly what we as fans need to come back to Star Wars. Granted that the writing and story are actually good." We then have this comment from Gaia Ray who said, "Like every Star Wars product, I want it to be good. It looks like it can have potential. My major concern is that Disney will try to integrate it into their trilogy or somehow try and make it super important to the main series. I want it to stand on its own, tell its own story, and not rely on nostalgia to maintain interest. Also, I don't want them to pull a Disney joke and have it be revealed that IG-11, I believe it is, has a toaster function or something. At this point, I wouldn't put it past them." Next up here we have this comment from Josh Adams who said, "If they explore the 1313 Clone Wars bounty hunter world, it could be amazing." Then we have this comment from Master Search who said, "It looks pretty cool, but I'm not really excited about it, only because I'm a very huge Jedi, Sith, lightsaber, the Force guy, and all that other stuff, bounty hunters, space dog fights, etc., aren't anywhere near the same level of interest for me than seeing a lightsaber battle or hopefully one day ancient Jedi vs ancient Sith Empire. If we ever get anything Old Republic, well then you will see me as one of the most excited Star Wars fans out there. But this Mandalorian show, I'll watch it, but I'll probably wait for a couple people to tell me what they think of it first, cause I'm just not that excited for it." And finally here we have this comment from Republic who said, "I honestly want good material to come from Disney Star Wars, and this looks promising." Same here. That's all I want, in fact. Just good, solid Star Wars content to enjoy. I'm right there with anyone and everyone who doesn't want political messages in Star Wars, or to have some sort of agenda pushed upon them. And yes, as many people will point out, Star Wars has always had very political themes. Some, if not most, have been very relevant to the modern times in which they came out. And though, mainly because of how much politics seems to be rammed down our throats these days in every form of entertainment, I'd prefer Star Wars to just be Star Wars these days. If you want to add political themes, it needs to be done or should be done in a way that gets people to think, not tells them how to think. Because that's really my main problem with the push for politics in entertainment. They have no interest in presenting stories that get the audience to stop and think about what they just saw, about what might be right or wrong in the situation. Instead, they tend to be very heavy-handed with the message or how they want you to think and feel, instead of getting you to reflect so that you can stop and wonder or ponder about how you should feel about something and why. Anyway, and maybe I'm just being foolishly optimistic because I do so desperately want a great Star Wars show, but I really don't think that's what this show is going to be. I don't think it's going to be a not-so-covert political propaganda machine or an agenda-laden garbage show. I think this is going to be a show made by Star Wars fans for Star Wars fans. And if it's not, if it's something else, if guys like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau can't give us a great, real Star Wars show, well then, to sort of echo what Luke once said to Vader, if that's the case, then my Star Wars is truly dead. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. My apologies for not getting to more comments, but this was one of those weeks, and no offense intended or anything like that, but it was one of those weeks where a lot of people were essentially saying the same thing, just in different ways. There were very prominent themes about how people felt, good and bad, and so I tried to mainly comment on that. And as I said at the start, sometimes the poll results, I feel, don't so much reflect how people actually feel, and this may have been one of those times. Anyway, for now, please either go check out the latest poll for the Clone Wars or leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.